You've heard me say it before, but technology is changing the game for SMBs. And if you've graduated to the scale stage, then it's true once again. You don't need big Madison Avenue budgets to be able to build a big league brand. Companies like Awarity and their founder, Aditya Varanasi, are changing the game. That's why they're on the show this week and why you ought to pay attention. I'm Bryon Morrison. Let's get to the leaders list.
Everything is happening through these screens.
How are we getting the most out of that person?
I want to see this thing grow long term.
Amazing story. You have such a unique perspective on that.
Schedule a 2-week vacation.
I applaud those models.
Undervalued.
Secure your digital footprint as well.
Why were they even put in place in the first place?
Only the most adaptable survive. Let's get to the leaders list. Aditya Varanasi, it is good to see you again. Welcome to the leaders list.
Good to see you, Bryon.
Hey, so listen, CEO of Awarity, I've known you since you were one of the rising stars in PepsiCo in their marketing world. And so I want you to be able to just give everybody a little bit of an understanding of how you got to where you are today. Let's just talk a little bit about Awarity and what you guys do. And so I'll give you the stage for a couple of seconds.
Awesome. Well, first off, thanks for having me on today. Really appreciate it. So, as you mentioned, we first met at PepsiCo. I actually started at PepsiCo as an engineer in the R&D group and worked on products like Lay's Stacks and Tostitos Scoops. And that's where I first got exposed to marketing and had an opportunity to work with the brand team on those businesses and learned a lot about the customer side, the competitive side, and it really intrigued me. So much so I went and got my MBA at Northwestern and moved back to Frito-Lay in the brand marketing group. And that's where we first met. And, I think the big thing I learned there is how important advertising is to growing a business. Even when you take a brand like Cheetos, for example, when we had a pricing discount and didn't have TV running, we actually saw less lift for the same pricing discount than when we did have TV running. And it all goes back to, yes, everything's digital, everything's measurable, but at the end of the day, these are humans we're trying to influence to buy products. And just seeing the commercial made people think, put the thought in their back of their mind, man, I love Cheetos. They're fun, they're playful, they make me feel like a kid again. Those aren't literal thoughts, those are sentiments people feel. Then when you see it in store, you're just more likely to notice it. The number one thing I hear when people know I'm in marketing is they say, hey, is Siri listening to me? Because it feels like I was talking about something and all of a sudden I'm seeing ads for it. But really the psychology is, as far as I know, they're not listening because I don't see that data anywhere. But what I can tell you is like when you're thinking about a product subconsciously, you're more likely to notice it when you see those ads. And I left PepsiCo. I was hired by a private equity firm to run a startup, which was essentially a small business. And I thought, hey, I'm going to try these same strategies I learned at PepsiCo for this small business. And I realized it's impossible. A lot of the advertising industry is controlled by the agency model, which works fantastic for so many brands. But there's millions of businesses that are under, $10, $20 million a year, where if they had to hire an agency, a significant percentage of their marketing budget would go to agency management fees because the agency's got to allocate headcount. Those headcount have to be paid. And so during that time with the private equity firm, I thought, hey, there's a real opportunity for smaller businesses to get access to the kinds of marketing PepsiCo did, but make it affordable by using software and AI. And I started Awarity back in really 2016. We tested with a limited number of clients for a couple of years, even spent a year at Capital One, running marketing for their auto refinance group and running some marketing operations there while I got this business going nights and weekends. And after a year at Capital One, we had happy customers and I felt like this business was scalable, that there really was a market for it, and left Capital One and went at this full speed in 2018. And here we are. We made the Inc. 5000 the last 3 years, fully expecting to make it again this year and likely next year as well. So, been a lot of fun to support small businesses, give them advertising solutions that they didn't imagine. They didn't think they can get on TV for $1,000 a month, but then showing them the impact it's having on bringing them new traffic that they wouldn't have reached before is the most satisfying part of what we do today.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I've always enjoyed your engineer mind applied against marketing because you just come at it from a different perspective of some of the other folks that I worked with in marketing. And um, it gave you a perspective on this that I think is different. And I always tell everyone that, marketing is part science, part art, but probably
Mhm.
more science. And that's always kind of hard for some people to comprehend because they're like, no, it's fun and creative. And yeah, it is. But it's the machine that
Right.
makes the marketing and advertising effective. So you're coming up on 10 years,
It's hard to
10
believe.
years. Yeah, that is really, first of all, congratulations, because that's not something that a lot of SMBs actually get to. And so you're coming up on 10 years. Talk a little bit about, so Awarity gives access to digital and online and television advertising. But talk a little bit about that because it's very different than what most people are used to. Because if I'm a small to medium sized business and I'm buying time or I'm
Yep.
buying advertising, I'm used to, like picking a channel and I'm
Yeah.
going to get started with radio, or I'm going to go
Yep.
do an ad in a magazine. This is old school. But, there's just a different mindset. And what you've really done is given access to the same thing that big corporations have. So talk a little bit about that, because I think it's a really unique offering.
Yeah, and I think the big thing that enabled it was the change in consumer behavior. So, we over the last 20 years, we've gone from reading the news in newspapers to reading it on websites. We've
Right.
gone from picking up the yellow pages and calling the plumber that had the quarter page ad in the yellow pages to looking online and reading reviews and seeing who we want to call. We've gone from, watching cable, which is all that advertising is purchased at the DMA level, meaning the city and beyond sees the
Mhm.
same commercial, to pretty much everyone's streaming now. Over 80% of households are streaming now, all generations. Cord cutting is really emerging. I mean, DirecTV is growing in their streaming segment now, not in the
Yeah.
satellite segment. And this change in consumer behavior enabled new levels of ad targeting that just didn't exist before. So take a brand like Cheetos, which I talked about before. You might want to serve ads nationwide because Cheetos buyers are everywhere. And you're going to spend a lot of money to go do that. Now imagine you're a local restaurant. So you take that Cheetos budget, and let's just say for simple math sake, let's say it's, $24 million, meaning you're spending $2 million a month, but there's 40,000 zip codes in the US that you've got to cover with that. Now imagine you're a local restaurant that maybe people drive 5 miles to. So you've got 5 zip codes you largely service. Well, in the old way, with a cable buy, you would have to buy the entire DMA, meaning you only want to reach 5 zip codes out of that entire media market. And you're spending to cover the entire media market, but you're only drawing customers from a very small subset. With streaming, we can actually isolate those 5 zip codes, only serve commercials in those 5 zip codes, and even get further honed to where, hey, if your customer is maybe families with young kids, we can isolate those households and only serve them commercials. So rather than guessing which programs your target customer is watching and then covering the entire DMA, even though you might be a local business, you can now be very, very targeted. So what that means is, we talked about, Cheetos spending theoretically $2 million for 40,000 zip codes. You can now spend $1,000 for 5 zip codes. You can actually get more media impact where it matters for you as a small business than even big brands can do nationwide nowadays, because you could be targeted. By being very precise, you're not trying to saturate the whole country. You're trying to saturate your ideal customer with
Yeah.
media.
And in the past, it used to be that I had to pick a new channel that was customized for that specific area, right? So the local
Exactly.
newspaper or the
Right.
specific magazine hit a segment of interest. Now I can literally do that with each individual computer, like literally the IP. And so it's an entirely different, buying process. Now, a lot of people are going to go, yeah, obviously, I know that. But I think it is different when we start thinking about TV and just, the approach that people go through. So when you started doing this, you started with online media, right? Remnant media, or you work a different
It was really
with
banner
different
ads on websites. Yeah,
publishers.
banner ads on websites. We purchased it through ad exchanges that had access to all the big name websites, and we're
Yeah.
able to reach a lot of new customers. Again, be very precision targeted with it.
Which was super effective. And I worked with you, and I know a lot of SMB customers worked with you in that regard, and that was successful. But then talk about what you've evolved into.
Yeah, look, that was the start because that was the biggest need. And we felt like there was an opportunity to embrace new technology to help these businesses beyond just Facebook and Google advertising to reach new customers. And now we're continuing to add more and more channels to our platform. So we have Amazon streaming where you can target households using Amazon first-party data. So imagine the power of what people are browsing and buying on Amazon and targeting those households within the Amazon ecosystem of streaming. Target on other connected TV at the household level, zip code level, based on their profile. We also have the banner ads, which let you target, not just based on zip code, but we could target on demographics. We could target on what people are reading about. So if you're a plumber, we can actually target content on common plumbing issues. So if somebody's reading about a leaky faucet, we can look to place a plumber's ad there, as long as it's within one of their target zip codes. So it's in context with what they're viewing. And on top of that, we have, we've added the heavy hitters like Google and Meta as well. So now in one platform, you can be on 5 ad channels, basically at the snap of a finger. And what happens is when customers see you on TV, then they see you on a website, then they see you in social media, then they search, they're more likely to click on your ad. And that's what the data shows. As we run and get these brands at a very affordable budget across 3, 4, 5 different ad channels, their organic search, the more and more people are just looking for them, and their website traffic grows exponentially from it. And that's when they start building these long-term sustainable growth businesses.
Yeah, and the experience is wildly different too when you start talking to companies about. Again, these are things that most companies didn't think they could get to. I can make a banner ad, and I can figure out how to put my logo on that. But now I can do a 30-second spot. I can do a 15-second spot, and I can actually. So again, that's a big production consideration. People are like, I don't know how to shoot a video. And now AI is coming along, and that's making some, like production very viable for people. So I think this is kind of an age of SMB where, the smaller companies can't, they have, you guys have democratized advertising so that they can play with the big boys and they can do things in a similar way. It's awesome.
Even above and beyond the AI tools, like we pioneered what we call the virtual production shoot, where we will get on a call. We'll make sure we'll check the specs of what phone they're using. New iPhones, new Android phones work really well. And we train them to get panning shots on the inside, how you tuck your elbows and rotate. They upload it to us via our app, and all of a sudden we've got some B-roll footage, which then we can use voiceover. We have voice talent. We also have some fantastic AI voice tools that we've learned to use. We put graphics. We've also purchased access to a massive stock footage library where every lifestyle shot you can imagine is already there. You blend it together, and these are high production quality 30-second commercials that we're charging only $1,500 for. And
awesome.
While the full AI generated tools aren't quite there yet, they're getting close. We're starting to bake those in as well, more and more. And the goal is reduce the price, because I'd rather our customers put more dollars in the media that reaches new customers versus the creative costs. So
working dollars,
it's an
right?
exciting world. Yeah, it's an exciting world we're in.
That's awesome. Okay, so we can see why you're successful. I mean, the offering, there's a clear market fit. And so you guys are doing an incredible job of that. Talk to us a little bit about Awarity and the stage that you're in. 10 years, you're building this company. You've gotten a lot of success. It's recently, I know, compounded. But talk to us about what's on your leaders list. What are the things that you're dealing with every day?
I think I think about our company in kind of 3 phases. And the first phase, which lasted, 3 to 5 years, you could argue, was just proving the viability of the model. Nobody
Right.
tried to tackle SMB advertising this way. Folks that had, some of them went out of business. Many of them struggled to retain customers. And creating an experience where the non-marketer small business owner understands the value and impact they're getting, because they want to make smart decisions. And so it's not just executing the campaigns, but also showing them how it's impacting their bottom line was a lot of what we had to figure out in those early days. And as we understood the market from that phase, we moved to the next phase, which was now let's start building the team and infrastructure. And at that time, we only focused on a couple ad channels. We only had the connected TV and the banner ads because we wanted to prove the model could work. Then we transitioned into, okay, let's start now building the team and the technology infrastructure to truly migrate this to a SaaS product that's scalable, can offer better prices, but still offer the human touch kind of as needed within the marketing industry. And now we're in the phase of let's start to now add more and more ad channels and more technology-based solutions to make it easier. So like we're launching customized franchise portals where franchise systems at the corporate level can choose, this is the creative, this is the service area each franchisee can advertise in. Let them choose their ad channels and budgets that work for their P&L. Define how we're going to target those ads to align with kind of the company strategy on customer acquisition. Let them pick creative that's pre-approved by corporate. Just a few clicks and they're running a company-approved campaign, but it's localized specifically for them and their needs. And so now we're at this phase where we're really trying to accelerate, add more ad channels, add more value. And there's a lot of really cool stuff that our R&D team's working on that's going to be coming very soon.
That's awesome. So how would you describe this third phase? Is this just service expansion where you're adding new things?
Yeah, I think service expansion's an easy way to describe it. I think it's really about offering the complete solution. So when I think about all the things I was trained to do when I was at PepsiCo in marketing and how you understand your customer, how you develop media plans to reach them, how you develop messaging that sets you apart from the competition, and then how you continually measure and improve so that the next year you can do better. We want to replicate that entire experience with the digital platform. We have massive components of it done. There's still more to go to offer that complete solution. So rather than service line expansion, I like to think about it as, hey, this is really about offering the complete solution. So every small business can do what the big companies are doing and maximize the impact of their marketing investment.
Well, Aditya, that is a huge undertaking. I mean, is there a certain point where you look at this and say, good enough? Like as you're going through these stages, do you have to complete the full marketing portfolio? Or could you look at this at a certain stage and go, well, this is my point where I sell, or this is my point where I decide that I don't need to, build out the entire thing?
Yeah, look, I think there's kind of two guiding philosophies on that. I think one, any decision that I think about, I look at three things. One, is it good for our customers? Second, is it good for our team? And then the third, is it sustainable as a business? Meaning it's got to be profitable, because if we're losing money on something, we're not going to be able to do it for very long. And so if something meets those three criteria, it's generally a good idea and we do it. I think the second guiding philosophy is you have to evolve or we're going to go extinct. And even though we might be on the forefront today, if we don't have that innovative mindset of trying to continue to find more ways to add value to our customers, somebody else is going to come in and try to replace us at some point. And so I think with that, if we're trying to create value for all stakeholders, and we're trying to find the right way to continue to evolve to meet evolving customer needs, there's going to be no shortage of options in the future. And so I think
that's the challenge, right? It's almost like there's too many options. That's what a lot of entrepreneurs run into, right? Is they burn themselves out on all of the different choices.
And I think with that, I think there's two sides to the choice. You talked about exit. I think as far as exit, hey, let's just focus on adding value. And who knows what choices there may be. Maybe I do this the next 20 to 30 years. I'm having fun what I'm doing. So why stop? Maybe there's other options. Who knows? But as long as we're creating value, those options are going to be there. I think the other thing is when you think about prioritizing, yeah, it is important to draw a line. I think when we think about ad channels, we like to focus on proven ad channels. The guy I worked for in the private equity firm was a value investor, very successful hedge fund manager, value investing hedge fund manager. And he learned a lot from, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, and brought that to his view on entrepreneurship. But same thing here. We invest in ad channels that are proven. We're not going to guess what the next big thing is in advertising. We're going to take what's tried and true and offer it in our platform. And I've always said, you're going to be able to do about 80% of what the big companies do with Awarity, but that 80% is far and away far more than what you're going to be able to do elsewhere. But staying at that 80% allows us to keep the price points affordable and be confident on the impact it can have.
Yeah, that makes sense. And talk to me about, how do you build a moat or protect yourself from technical debt? When we just think about the idea that you started 10 years ago, right? So you're bringing on methodologies that you learned 10, 15 years ago, and then you're applying that, but the system is changing all of the time, right? And with AI, that is a massive set of changes unto itself. So how's a company like yours continue to evolve and grow and then build a moat around what you've created when you know that, just like you said, there's someone in a garage or a basement who is building this completely with AI, and they have a different mindset and a different approach? How do you manage that?
Yeah, no, look, I think, and this is a very cliche statement, but I'm going to bring color to it so it's not cliche. It really comes down to the people. Our number one asset at Awarity is our team. And with that, I mean, people get 14, 15 hours of work done in an 8-hour day. We take work-life balance very seriously because people do work so hard while they're here. I want to make sure they have that time when they're not here to recharge. And that's the unspoken agreement, is you push really hard while you're here. But I think with that, the expectation is that we treat every customer interaction like a focus group, whether it's a sales call, whether it's a performance review call, whatever that is, and we debrief on them daily. The customer team debriefs on them daily. And what did we learn? What do they need? What's the product doing? What could the product do? Not what they're saying. What are they feeling? Because as you know, you can't always ask a customer, what do you want? You have to listen for what they need and architect a solution. So I think first and foremost in our culture, we have to always be listening to the customer and being attuned to how their needs are evolving and how we can better meet those needs. The second thing we do is every Friday, we call it Friday Festivus, the airing of grievances. But the notion is we share friction points, whether it's a customer friction point, whether it's an internal operation friction point, whether it's something we're doing in our day-to-day that we feel like could be better or inefficient. And we track it, we log it, we assign a next step, we prioritize it accordingly, and we move forward. But it gets everybody in the mindset of thinking about how can we be better next week than we were this week. And I think that really just comes from the mindset. And that's how we build a moat, is understanding the customer and architecting a complete solution to meet the customer's needs. If you wanted to replicate what Awarity's doing, there are several companies you can go to for pieces of it. What we're doing uniquely is you can do all of it under one roof in one platform and make it really easy. And that came from this mentality of what does the customer need to be successful, blending that with what we know from a marketing science standpoint they need, advertising science standpoint they need to be successful, and then listening for how they're receiving it and what their feedback is so that we just continue to iterate and make it better. The number of new features we've added in the last 6 months is mind-blowing. The stuff coming in the next 6 to 12 months, I anticipate it's going to be even more mind-blowing as far as what these customers are going to be able to do in our platform.
Okay, last question about how you manage this, but and then we'll talk about everybody else's leaders list. But how do you keep from sub-optimizing? Because I love, client first, customer first, pay attention, listen to them, be customer service focused, and that is typically the true north. What I do see is it also creates complexity and options and so many things that you could work on. So in your leaders list, how do you prioritize?
Yeah. So look, I think it comes down to a couple of things. One, we don't always say yes. And that's something we train our team on is you don't always have to say yes. Understand the need and then have a conversation and let the facts bear what makes sense. The number of times we've had to say we can't do that or that's not on our priority list is staggering, but it's not that we say no. We say no, but, and we present options, other ways to address it. Einstein has a famous quote where he said, if he had an hour to solve a problem and his life depended on it, he would spend 55 minutes figuring out the right questions to ask. And that's how we approach it. Is you can sub-optimize quickly if you're reactionary, but if you're asking questions and trying to understand, what we find is there's a lot of different ways to solve a problem. Many of them we already have. And so we do engage in that way is, hey, we listen for what the need is. We'll share back our point of view, but I think what makes us different is we're not just going to say yes. We might say no, but, and present an alternative. And that's something we train our customer facing team on is provide options, because generally we can solve after this many years. And I think one of the reasons it's taken longer is we've been very methodical to make sure we understand how to stitch what's best for the customer with what the customer says they need.
Yeah, it's really smart. And that is that's kind of an empirical process as well, right? You listen for patterns, you listen for how often people are saying the same thing. But capturing it all is really, kind of the core piece. And that's what I find that a lot of companies that we work with, they say all these things. They say, we're going to have a great culture and we're going to believe in our people. They don't have that, what did you call your Friday session? Your airing
Friday
your
Festivus.
grievances?
Yeah.
Friday Festivus. They don't specifically have that. They don't do the reviews after each client input session or an annual review, or they don't ask for those. And most importantly, they don't document it. They don't capture it anywhere.
Yep.
And so I know, that kind of discipline is one of the reasons that Awarity is as successful as it is today, and how you can manage through all of that, tsunami of information that comes in from clients, which is a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Yeah, and it just requires us to think a little different, which isn't always easy. Some of them are. Sometimes we when we're working with an agency, in which sometimes we do, sometimes that's a journey too, because they're like, well, the client wants that. It's like, yeah, but that's not what's best for them. And it's almost like, wait, you push back? It's like, yeah, we push back, but we do it in an educational, collaborative spirit, not assuming the client doesn't know what they're talking about. They have a reason they're asking for it. Let's understand what they're ultimately looking to accomplish, and then we come up with solutions that might be easier to implement.
How many of your folks on your team have been client side versus agency side?
Not many. We had a handful that were client side. We don't have anybody that's agency side.
Yeah. So one of the things that you are doing is teaching a different mindset. And, it is interesting because in the agency world, that's a customer service first perspective. And oftentimes the mistake is that they don't actually go through like what is the real underlying issue that is taking place, and we can push back. You having been on the client side, you're used to saying, well, why can't I have that? Or I don't really need that, and I know how to prioritize. So it's just a different perspective.
Very, very much so. No, it's a good point that you bring up.
Yeah, it sets you up well. Okay, so we've talked about your leaders list and what you're working on. I'm an SMB leader. I'm running a business. I'm doing well. I'm already, successful. I have marketplace fit. Things are going well. Why should I start thinking about advertising and what Awarity offers versus, what my team is currently doing? Like, what's the expansion principle that makes this worthwhile?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, and I think the example you articulated meets it, is you have to have a proven sales and marketing process. Because at the end of the day, advertising is going to get you traffic, and you want to make sure your sales and marketing process is mature to the point that you can convert some of that traffic. And that means the digital experience through your website. Is your value proposition clear? Are next steps clear through that? Do you have a sales process where when you do capture a lead, you know how to convert that lead, the qualified leads, into customers, because you can meet a need that they came to you for. And so we try to set, I think people can think about that in revenue. You can think of, it's not just revenue. It could be, maybe $500,000 to $750,000 or higher, but there's businesses smaller than that have very mature processes. So it's not an absolute on revenue. I think the way that we think about it is say, hey, for a modest budget, would you be interested in growing your web traffic significantly? Would you be interested in building high top of mind brand awareness? And the cases where it doesn't work outside of not having mature sales and marketing process is where maybe the customer is just so niche that advertising isn't the best way to reach them. We talked to a sales prospect once. They said, yeah, there are only 70 people in the US that would care what we have to offer. And I was like, do not advertise. It's like,
You're right.
Send those 70 people a gift box. Like, that's going to be a better use of your money versus try to run a paid advertising strategy. But for the majority of businesses, a lot of times when customers are making a choice, like, pause for a second, you have to buy a new refrigerator tomorrow. You probably have 3 brands top of your mind because those brands have invested in building awareness with you. And a lot of small businesses miss that opportunity. And with Awarity, you can do that locally and affordably, is build that top of mind awareness. B2B, you can also be very affordable with B2B because we're hyper targeting the business decision makers you want to go after. So again, it can be very, very affordable. Awarity may not be the reason they buy, but Awarity may be the reason why when your sales team calls that prospect, that they take the call because they've heard the name before and they know something about you. And so really, if you can
well,
make
I was just going to say,
go ahead.
The power behind that is, and this is what I think businesses need to understand. A lot of them will start with, I need more leads, I need more revenue. And it is a stage. So advertising is a stage in that process. So to your point, even if a company doesn't have marketplace fit yet, I think it's the best investment anybody could ever make is to work with your team to find out that if I drive more traffic to my website and nothing happens, that's learning. So when you said it doesn't work, I would argue it actually works really well, because it'll immediately tell you that something is wrong on your end. It's that message, it's that next connection. If people aren't going to the website from the advertising that you're doing, that also tells you that, like, whatever that message is not resonating at that level, right? So I do think it's super important for people to just recognize that it is, you have to have that level of, I almost said awarity. You have to be aware of the fact that advertising works in stages, and you can test and learn at each of those stages. And so most companies start with their owned asset, their website. They've been working on that for a while, and they watch what happens. But that's also probably a known audience that's coming to them, or that is, somebody that they have been cultivating over time, and there's no net new, or there's no one that is brand driven. And that's a whole new audience that they can start to target and start to interact with and see how their message resonates. And so I just can't underscore that enough for SMBs that are listening to this. There is a next stage in the engine that you have to put fuel in. And that's the part we're talking about.
And that's the question you got to ask yourself is you say, hey, if you're doing all the same things as your competitors, how are you standing out versus your competitors? And what we're trying to offer is a way to get visibility beyond what your competitors are doing. And at the end of the day, you can even have 2 businesses in the same industry. Like, we've worked with multiple HVAC companies. One of them was focused on selling service plans to higher income households for the peace of mind. And the other was focused on rapid response. And there's a role for both. And so standing out for what makes you distinctive can only attract new customers. But the only pushback I'll have on what you said prior is I know sometimes for SMBs, cash is king and managing cash is important. And so I always tell people, be at a phase, because advertising may or may not yield immediate customer growth. It can, but it's not guaranteed to, especially depending on the stage of business. That's why we put that qualifier of, hey, is your sales and marketing process mature to a point so that they're most likely? Sometimes you got to assess what your priorities are that day with your limited resources. And so not to say we unsell or we'll turn them away, but sometimes we sense, hey, if a business needs some immediate results, we'll encourage either lower funnel tactics like paid search or email marketing or other things to do with your CRM. Put your money there, build a base, understand what they need, and then be ready to go market. Doesn't mean we'll turn them away, but we always advise it because we don't want people to be in a position where they can't stick with the market. You don't want to turn it on and off. You want to be able to run it and let it do its thing.
I think that's one of the things also that I want to underscore for our listeners is if you're going through the process and you think you are ready, your team is a great team to be able to talk to because you're going to tell them the truth. And I think, there's a lot of people that work in media where they're going to be focused on media. They need they need you to get into the medium, and they're used to selling to companies that are buying multiple media channels. There's an in-between here where I'm just now starting to understand advertising. I'm thinking about this differently. I would recommend that anybody who is at that stage where they are thinking about doing this to talk to Awarity and your team, because you need to have somebody who can say to you, you're not ready for this. And that's not a bad thing. That's just an honest thing, right? And so you guys can give counsel on what to go work on, what to do before that. But again, it is a stage. It is you have to have your owned assets right. You have to know that your marketplace fit is correct. You have to know and have tested some different promotional concepts, among your own clients. Do they respond really well to this idea? Then you can take that and scale it.
No, absolutely. And look, I think what I like is we have aligned incentives with the prices we charge and how much effort it is to get a campaign up and running. It's only a good partnership for us too if somebody sticks with it for some time. Right. Folks that run for 1 month, turn it off, while that might be attractive, it's not good in the long term. And I like having that aligned incentive with our customers, is that we've got to continuously provide the value we said we would provide, and they have to be ready to make that investment month over month, and then it's a fruitful relationship. We have our obligations, they have their obligations, and that's again kind of how we got to that criteria. But not to say it's black and white. That's kind of how we got to that criteria.
I just love that because it's clearly built for SMB. I think people who I don't want to say they prey on SMBs, but if you haven't had as much experience in that, there's a lot of groups out there that are like, look, I'm just looking for that one big project, do it, turn, move away. Yeah. And they rinse and repeat, and they're really good at that. And that's built for SMB, right? Because it is short term, rinse and repeat. I can do this quickly. I can provide some help. But I do know that when there are certain services that are required to work over a period of time, you have to be built for that. The fees have to work that way. The mindset of the team has to work that way. And so that's what I think you guys have done a great job of. And that's, like in Proxy, we do the exact same thing. We would rather have no long-term agreements, but know that most people stay with us for years because the service offering is right and it's built for them.
That's exactly us. That's exactly us too.
Yeah. Okay. So Aditya, I'm listening to this right now. I'm hooked on, I'm ready to start advertising. I'm going to think differently about this, but I think that I'm going to stop listening and I'm going to go do something. What's the thing that you would recommend everybody go and do and add to their leaders list right now?
Yeah, I would think about what an ongoing advertising strategy can do for you to bring you consistent new traffic above and beyond what you're currently doing. I think the biggest challenge we have is not a lot of people know this is possible. And when they learn that it's possible and they learn the kind of impact we have, we promise people we'll get them more traffic. That doesn't mean we're going to get them more customers, but we are going to get them more qualified traffic. And if you're ready for that, then visit awarity.com. We'd like to work within your budget. One of the things I say on every sales call that I'm on is we'd rather you pick a budget you can stay with, and we'll recommend the best way to deploy it, than have you spend too much and have unrealistic expectations. Pick a smaller budget that's easy to fit and easy to stick with, and you're going to see those rewards over time. So I would just say anybody listening, think about how you're reaching new customers. And good advertising comes down to three things: reach, frequency, and a compelling message. Are you reaching the right people and enough of them? And the more, the better. Because imagine you're trying to convince your friend to do something on a weekend. You're not guaranteed to have that success to convince your friend to do something on the weekend. Now imagine you're trying to do it with an ad. So numbers matter because you have to capture people and enough people to move the needle. Frequency is important because you don't want to reach the same person too many times, and you don't want to reach them too few times. And there's a sweet spot in there. Somewhere between 3 and 6 times a month is generally a good sweet spot to be at, that we've seen campaigns be successful. And then a compelling message. What are you offering that nobody else can offer? How are you making their lives, your customers' lives, better in a way nobody else can? And when you combine those three, and you have those three as part of an advertising campaign, it will bring you new traffic you wouldn't reach otherwise, because there's only so many people you can call a day, only so many people you can email a day. And this is a way to evangelize your brand and business's value to many more target customers. So if there's a role for it, think about it. How are you reaching new customers? How frequently are you reaching those target customers? And what is the message? And reflect on that. And if you think advertising can help, we're always happy to talk and share our honest opinion.
Aditya Varanasi, this has been really, really helpful for our listeners. We appreciate you talking about what's happening with Awarity, and we just want to thank you for being on the leaders list.
Thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun. And if I can ever help you, let me know.
Appreciate it. All right. Thanks again.